like Bob Dylan said,
What did he
a
say?
hard rain is gonna fall.
Yeah,
Right?
well,
He was talking
he
about
was
that.
right. But, if you make that prediction 60 years ago, eventually you're going to be right somewhere, you know? I mean, you'd
If I
think.
wrote a song about like the sun expanding to supersized incinerating the earth,
Yeah, eventually people will, they'll say, wow, he was smart.
right?
Um, he really, he was really the poet of that time,
He called it.
millions of years ago. He was the poet of millions of years ago.
Welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends take a second listen to influential bands' catalogs track by track. I am J. William Hall.
And I'm Dan Fiden. We'll be taking this journey together, providing context, both personal and historical, on some legendary bands. For our second season, we've picked pioneering indie rockers American Music Club.
Today on Backtracking, are you ready to go? You'll be happier, I know. But not only to the Royal Cafe, dear listeners. We're on the way to cover each and every track on American Music Club's fifth studio album, the revelatory 1991 release, Everclear. So stick a six-pack under your seat, Dan, because it's never too late to forget. Are you ready to forget?
I sure am, JW. But before we forget, we've got a few things to keep in mind. Around the time that Eitzel decamped to the UK to record Songs of Love Live, Lisa Fancher was finally able to overcome a full year of Leslie Mallon's meddling and sign the distribution deal with BMG subsidiary RCA. This unlocked money that could be used to record Everclear. But a year is a long time in the music business, and just as the band was beginning work, RCA's president was fired. The label's new boss promptly dropped Frontier, and AMC along with them. Fancher secured a $40,000 breakup fee from RCA, however, and generously offered to provide the entire amount to the band to complete the record. With Tom Mallon out of the picture as both bassist and producer, the band turned to Bruce Kaphan to produce. Recording progressed in Menlo Park at the Annex Studios, with Kaphan's more laid-back, hands-off demeanor resulting in drama-free sessions. Voody, Danny, and the gang were pleased.
And so was Eitzel. Mostly. But before he had an opportunity to address his concerns with the songs they'd recorded, the band would have to deal with still more drama. AMC was under the impression that Fancher's offer to pay for Everclear would not require them signing a contract extension. When the contracts arrived and specified 6 records with Frontier, they realized they were incorrect. They refused to sign, and Fancher, Leslie Mallon, and the band wrangled for months. A solution appeared in the form of Delight Jenkins and Alias Records. While Alias was a small label, it was relatively well-funded. Jenkins and Leslie Mallon got along well, and Fancher was finally ready to give up the drama associated with AMC. Jenkins reimbursed Fancher her costs for Everclear, and AMC became Alias's biggest signing to date. The move to Alias also set the stage for the band to finish the album, and Eitzel wanted to address Kaphan's mixes on a few tracks. Experienced producer Joe Ceccarelli was brought on to help Eitzel achieve the big radio sound he'd long been after, and he remixed much of what Kaphan had done, with the exception of Confidential Agent and What the Pillar of Salt Held Up. With the album completed, Eitzel decided to settle the rest of AMC's family business. He replaced drummer Mike Sims with longtime collaborator Tim Mooney, and after she was dismissive of the clearly positive results from Songs of Love Live, he finally fired Leslie Mallon. AMC began the 90s with a new label, a polished, beautiful new album, and a clean slate.
So what else started with a clean slate in 1991? Edith Cresson becomes France's first female prime minister, and the legal apartheid system in South Africa ends. George H.W. Bush declares a unilateral reduction in short-range nuclear missiles. Ukraine declares independence from the USSR. Aung San Suu Kyi wins the Nobel Peace Prize. And Ed Sheeran is born. So, J. William, can we just pause for a moment to appreciate that Ed Sheeran was born the same year as Everclear was released? Which of those two do you think has aged better?
Well, needless to say, I'm more of an AMC fan myself.
Yeah. Have you ever heard an Ed Sheeran song?
Oh, I'm positive I have, but I couldn't tell you, you know?
Yeah, I mean, he is one of these people who I immediately recognize him. He seems completely omnipresent. I understand that he's a musician that is kind of broadly well-liked. He has kind of a broad appeal. But I could not, I couldn't describe to you what he sounds like. I have no idea what his music is like. But I will say
Nor I.
he's a very British-looking young man, don't you think?
Indeed. And, you know, what he could do
Yeah.
to win over the old geezers like us, the vastly important Gen X
Demographic.
cover a goddamn American Music Club song.
You know what? Here. I think that is a terrific idea. And as soon as we are finished recording this podcast, I am going to go onto the social media. I'm going to send him a message. He clearly is going to know about the Backtracking podcast. I'm sure he's going to be there on the Instagram. He's going to be like, wait a second. I got an alert in my direct messages. Who's this from? Could it be from Taylor Swift or some other, well-known celebrity? The Backtracking podcast official Instagram account at Backtracking Rocks ROX. What could they possibly have to say to me, Ed Sheeran?
I think Ed Sheeran's at the point now where he's got plenty of help. He's got an Instagram boy. Instagram boy!
Who checks the Instagram
It's an
and
Instagram boy.
reports to him what was the Instagram boy.
Yeah. You paint quite a picture. You paint quite a picture. It's a very kind of colonial picture, actually. I imagine Ed Sheeran on some kind of a papaya plantation in old French colonial Vietnam, right?
I can really picture him in like the colonial outfit, like the sort of velvety short pants with like the long socks and the
that's the tricorn hat.
I think velvety short pants is a terrific name for an album, actually. All right, so speaking of albums,
maybe that will be the name of Ed Sheeran's AMC tribute album,
Velvety Short Pants, a tribute to Mark Eitzel and American Music Club. You know what? We could probably put that together. What is it? We could be the producers of that effort.
Sure.
I mean, it's a logical next step in building the media empire here.
It's true.
First Rush, then American Music Club. So before we dive into Everclear, which is just an unbelievably important album to me, I want to go through some housekeeping for the podcast. Okay?
Boring.
Well, you know what? We've got some things that we need to share with the listeners that I feel like it's important to share. So number one, listeners, I want to share with you that we record these episodes. We are about a month to a month and a half ahead of what's actually being released. And so we may reference things here and there that feel like they're in the past. If you happen to be one of the many, many listeners that, wait by your phone for each episode to drop every Tuesday, Wednesday overnight. Just know that we are aware of this delay. We want you to be aware of the delay. We'll do our best to be responsive to your comments and concerns and questions and corrections you share with us, but you may not see them or you may not hear us talk about those in the very next week. On that topic, audio issues. So we had severe audio issues that were entirely my fault for the Engine episodes. We corrected those mostly in the California episodes, but we are now engaged in a new process of how we're editing the audio for these episodes. In some of the episodes to date, you will hear tiny little dropouts of audio here and there. Unfortunately, it's a function of the way we had been recording the audio through Discord. It's very handy. There's this little gizmo called Craig that we use, and it's been very helpful. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, it just ends up with this weird kind of digital artifacting and these little delays that are impossible to edit out well. You are going to hear some of those, or you've heard some of those already by the time you hear this. I apologize for them, but from here on out, the audio is going to be silky smooth, exactly like the production of the album Everclear. That's the housekeeping, J. William Hall. I also just wanted to say that we've gotten a tremendous amount of help from Richard, who's the archivist of all things American Music Club. He's been helpful in any number of ways. We really appreciate that. We've heard from a number of listeners already. We really appreciate all of you listening. And, I don't want to tease anything because it may not end up happening, but we have also been in contact with nearly all of the kind of members of American Music Club to talk to them about coming on the podcast. We don't have anybody confirmed yet, but we're very, very hopeful that they can fit it into their schedules and they wouldn't mind kind of chatting with us a little bit about the remarkable catalog of material that they have in their history that we all still love to listen to and enjoy. So hopefully we'll get some of those folks, other than Greg, who we've already talked to, in future episodes. So with that, J. William Hall, are you ready to dive in to Everclear?
I'm ready. I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, so we are going to start with the basics, just like we always do. This album was released on October 5th, 1991 on Alias Records. So Alias Records is a new label for the band with Everclear. It was an independent label. It was a mostly unknown label prior to signing AMC. Subsequent to signing AMC, they had a couple of other, large-ish signings. But AMC was kind of the first most notable of the Alias signings. It was founded by a woman named Delight Jenkins, who was passionate about the band, but ended up just kind of coming at the right time when they really, the band and Leslie Mallon and Lisa Fancher had gone through a few years of just wrangling and frustration and false starts and all of the bad things that we've been talking about the past couple of episodes. She showed up at the right time. She had enough money to cover the cost of this, and so she was able to step in and pay for the production or the remaining production of Everclear.
Okay, so Alias Records, I went on to Discogs and I was looking through because I was like, who else was on Alias Records? And I had such a nostalgia wave of these band names that I had not, like these bands that were kind of like college radio popular-ish around the time, such as Too Much Joy. Do you remember Too Much Joy?
I remember the name. I don't think I ever heard them.
X-Tall.
Oh, I don't think I ever heard.
Hypno Love Wheel.
God, no. I don't remember.
This band from Cincinnati called Throneberry. Then some more popular bands. One of the early Yo La Tengo albums was on Alias, and then a band called Archers of Loaf, which went on to become more popular. But the one that I was like, oh my God, was this band called The Skeletons, who I have like completely seemingly dropped off the radar, after that time. But I have the Skeletons, one of their albums on vinyl, and it's this really cool orange vinyl. And I bought it, I think, solely on the basis of AMC being on Alias Records. And I liked the cover and it said Alias Records. I was like, oh, I'll buy it, but it was sort of an eclectic group of bands that were on this label.
Yeah, I mean, definitely some notable bands though in that list. Yeah, Alias, the Sean Body book, which you kind of there's some salt that you should probably take with the information from that. At least that's what I've been told. They kind of say that this woman, Delight Jenkins, was like essentially like independently wealthy, had family money or something, and was kind of doing Alias as a hobby. And they my impression from reading the book is that said somewhat derisionally, as though it's not quite a professionally run operation. It isn't necessarily the label that maybe they should have signed to, but it is the label that showed up at the moment when Lisa Fancher was finally willing to just kind of give up on making it work with the band any longer.
So let me ask you this: was the record or the deal with Demon Records in the UK, was that wrapped up in the Frontier deal? Like, did they lose Demon then when they went to Alias?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know who, maybe it says in Discogs who did the EU distribution of Everclear. But my guess is that Demon was kind of out of the picture.
Yeah, they were, because it looks like it was Virgin in the UK.
Yeah, see, it's interesting. There in the book there is kind of a bit of information about Virgin, and there's a lot that happens from a business perspective with the band kind of between Songs of Love Live and Mercury. So we talk about it, we've talked about it a little bit in the kind of scripted open for Songs of Love Live, talked a little bit more about it in today's episode. And then we'll try to cover kind of the rest of that whole story, which includes changes of management, signing to a new label again, when we end up covering Everclear. So do you want to talk about the cover art for this one before we get into the production? The production is really an area I want to spend a bit of time on, but we should talk about the cover art. Yeah.
Okay, but let me ask you this.
Okay.
before
we even get into the cover art.
Yes.
So Tom Mallon.
Yes.
So leading up to the album.
Yes. Leading up to the album.
There is a collection that's out there.
Yes.
That's called the Everclear demos.
Yes.
And these are recordings that the band made in late 1990, I believe.
Yes.
And you can hear, it's most of the songs on Everclear, but I know that somewhere in that area is when things fell apart with Tom Mallon.
Yeah.
And am I correct in it was like late 1990 then when things fell apart with him? And when did they get like Mike Sims in on drums? Was he because things fell apart with Tom Mallon, or was that separate?
No, because Mallon was, so a few things here. Mallon was on bass by this time. So okay. I don't know if you remember, I think the last drummer was...
it was Tom Mallon.
Tom Mallon was the drummer only for Engine, right?
United Kingdom. No, Engine had like 4 different drummers. Then,
no. So was Sluggo was after Tom Mallon took over on bass, correct? My recollection is that Mallon moved from drums to bass when what's his name? The guy, one of the very early guys, left the band following Engine, or around the time of Engine.
Yeah, Mallon's on drums for California.
Okay.
And then for United Kingdom, you're right. Mike Sims is already on drums.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Mike's
on bass.
Yeah.
My bad.
You know what it was when that woman, Lisa, I can't remember her name, Lisa something, was
Davis.
Lisa Davis.
Yeah.
Lisa Davis leaves the band due to health issues, which allows Mallon to move on to bass. That's when they bring in Mike Sims. Is my recollection, right? And so the band is kind of in that state. Now to address the second issue, and I'm piecing this together from the various sources that I've spoken to. Primarily, it's the Sean Body book, but then I also did speak to Richard. Unfortunately, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Brazier, the AMC archivist. Very nice young man. We had a very long telephone call the other day. And and we talked about this very topic. And so he was instrumental in one way or another of getting those Everclear demos recordings released. And we talked about those specifically. So my understanding, I hope I'm not getting this wrong, is that those demos were recorded, that's the stuff that was recorded in Malin's studio, kind of prior to the label issues being sorted out. Eitzel had already kind of decided that he wanted to work with a different producer on the album, but the songs were good. Malin was eager to record even before the record label stuff got sorted out. And so they agreed to basically do recordings of demos in Malin's studio. And it was during the recording of those demos that they had a huge blow up between the band and Malin. And that was kind of the end of Malin's, that blow up was the end of his involvement with the band, both as a producer and a band member. Does that make sense?
But his wife was still kind of managing them.
Yeah, exactly. Which is one of the, it's one of the, I think in the story that's kind of laid out in the Sean Body book is one of the strangest bits of information that I've heard. It just seems very odd that they made this decision. Undoubtedly, there's more to this story, and my understanding is that Tom Malin really didn't talk to Sean Body about the writing of this book, and so there's some sense that maybe Malin is treated a little bit unfairly in the book. But all that said, what it does say in the book is that essentially, Leslie Malin came in after she started kind of seriously dating Tom, became the manager, but from the beginning, she and Tom, their relatively aggressive kind of style really didn't mesh with a whole bunch of different people. Probably most importantly, Lisa Fancher, who was the head of the label they were on. And they were butting heads from the beginning. But it's not as though they it didn't really seem as though they made a real clear decision like, yes, Lisa is the one, or Leslie is the one that we want to manage the band. It was more like, well, Tom's girlfriend / wife is happy to manage the band, so let's just do that. Then when Tom quits, for whatever reason, they just decide that they're going to keep her on, even though she doesn't get along with Lisa Fancher at all. Her relationship with Eitzel is not real great. And yeah, so there's at least a year there between Tom leaving and when Lisa is ultimately fired. Where she's kind of managing the band. And it seems as though during that period of time, really nothing from a business perspective in the US happens with the band. Everything good that happens with the band is kind of a result of Demon Records in the UK doing things. So that's like United Kingdom being released, that's Songs of Love Live being released. And I guess the thing that finally pushed Eitzel over the edge with Lisa Malin was he went kind of against her wishes and did Songs of Love Live. The sales were pretty good. The reviews were really good. Nothing was happening with AMC at that point anyway. And even when it all was done, she wouldn't admit that she was wrong and kind of her advice was not good on that. And so Eitzel was just like, listen, she's just too negative. She doesn't believe in the band. And he was just like, fuck it, we're going to fire her. So when Everclear is released, they don't have management at all.
Ah, okay. So the Everclear rehearsals, those are Malin demos, is what you're saying?
Yeah. That's my understanding.
And then there is on YouTube, there is a live performance from November of 1990 where AMC plays at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco. And it's mostly, or it definitely previews a lot of Everclear stuff. And I mean, you can hear the sound of the album immediately. Like they open with Ex-Girlfriend and the pedal steel is right out front, and like you can see and I thought that was notable just in that, after like California and United Kingdom and the live recordings that are out there, they still sound like that first era band. But I think this is the point. This is the, when they cross over the sound, the pedal steel comes to the forefront and they really kind of capture a new overarching sound, basically.
Yeah, I think that is one of the most interesting parts of this album. And I think you've kind of, if you're okay with it, let's move into the production. I do want to make one note that Richard kind of shared with us. Basically, during the time between kind of United Kingdom and Everclear's release, there's a couple of years where they're struggling trying to figure out what's going to happen next. Eitzel's doing a lot with Toiling Midgets during that time, but yes. AMC is playing live. They're mostly playing live inside of San Francisco. Eitzel is doing solo shows, so it's not like the band is on total hiatus, but there's definitely yet another kind of periods of momentum loss for the band.
Treading water.
Yeah, while they're trying to get the, yet another set of label issues kind of sorted out. But back to what you were saying about Kaphan, that Great American Music Hall show, and the sound of Everclear. As we get into production, I want to read you a section from the Wikipedia entry on Everclear. Okay. Eric Weisbard of Spin Alternative Record Guide 1995 wrote that Everclear marked American Music Club's failed attempt to, quote, take over the world, adding that the album was, quote, weirdly produced by Kaphan. Imagine a pedal stylist's megalomaniac fantasy with the would-be modern rock hit Rise, especially cheesy. However, he praised several songs, including the more mournful AIDS-inspired Sick of Food and The Dead Part of You. Pitchfork's Chris Ott included Everclear in a list of albums common in secondhand stores. He wrote, hideously produced for Alias, the same label that fucked up Yo La Tengo's May I Sing With Me. Everclear is an overstuffed, underdeveloped album drenched in a plate of reverb on par with Queensryche. So
Jesus,
incredibly negative descriptions of this album, and I think they are 100% wrong.
Yes. Well, here I'll say they're 95% wrong, and we'll get into it when we get into the production. But fuck those guys. Unnecessarily harsh.
My God.
I mean, classic music writer, right? I mean,
right.
Classic music writer just trying to be a dick.
I've noted something, because I still read a lot of, music blogs and whatever, and they're reviewing albums. And maybe it's just that they generally only review albums that they want to review now. But there's a definite, drop in the number of outright, vicious,
just slagging albums,
Yeah.
I feel like that used to happen more commonly, and it was almost like
that was
these
thing.
writers. Yeah, it was a thing. Like they had to kind of earn their chops by tearing down different albums in some of the reviews or whatever. And but I needless to say, I disagree with these two gentlemen.
Well, I mean, even if you kind of set aside that I agree was certainly kind of a 90s, early 2000s thing, right? About kind of what music writers would do. They'd be super, super snarky. Set that aside and take what they're saying on their words. I just think this is a completely wrong estimation of not just the album in and of itself, but how this album sits within the progression of American Music Club's albums. I think it's okay to say, I really like early American Music Club because I like the more Americana, more lo-fi kind of vibe in the early records. I think that's a reasonable take. But I just think that this album sounds so rich, so powerfully atmospheric and kind of soundscaptual, J. William Hall.
Yes.
And cohesive in a way that no other American Music Club album has sounded to this date.
Well, I would argue that this album is singular unto itself. I cannot think of another album that I would be like, oh, that kind of sounds like Everclear. Like, this is singular unto itself, okay? So there may be some reverbs or something in there that are of their era, but it was done beautifully and it was unique,
Yeah, and I don't know. I just feel like, and again, I attribute this. It could be wrong that I attribute this to Kaphan, but when I look at there are certainly drummer changes over the course of the early era of the band. There are, some bass playing changes and stuff like that. But more or less, I think the band is relatively kind of stable insofar as personnel, and certainly stable insofar as studio and producer, right? And then they move to this, and there is a wholesale change in their sound. And I think that wholesale change coalesces the band into what I think of when I think of the American Music Club sound, right? It is not purely Americana or alt country. It is not purely slowcore. It is not purely kind of like atmospheric. It's this interesting, very unique combination of all of those things. But every song, from one song to the next, whether they're upbeat, downbeat, mostly Eitzel solo, full band, rockers, they all for the first time sound like a single band to me on this record. I think that this album, in total contrast to what these two idiots wrote in the 90s about this album, I think this represents just a quantum leap forward for the band. We'll talk about Mercury, next time, and we can debate the production on that and whether that's yet another step forward or a step back or just a step laterally. But I think that the band, as a result of whatever happened in preparation for Everclear and during the recording of Everclear, really goes from the minor leagues to the big leagues creatively. I just think this is like a mature, unique, wonderful sounding album.
And it's kind of ironic coming out of the period that they came out of, where things seemed so like they were drifting a little bit, with the band, and it was unclear like what direction they should go. And so, I didn't know, I was hoping that we would cover what was initially released from this album was the Rise EP.
Yeah.
So I think that was released a month or two prior to the album itself. And so the first thing out of the gates was the song Rise. Like, that was the introduction to kind of the new American Music Club or whatever, and what a dramatic change, coming off of arguably their most lo-fi album.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is well, all right. So we're gonna go song by song in here, but why don't we? So on the production, we're talking a lot about Bruce Kaphan. Another thing that I just don't really have the answer to. It's talked about a little bit in the book, but honestly, it's tough for me to really know exactly what's going on. But Bruce Kaphan came in, and he was the producer during the recording of all of the initial tracks, right? So everything.
My impression is that his production chops came from the fact that he was like he was an engineer, right? Like that, like a record engineer. Like, isn't that his?
I don't know that.
His job?
I don't know that. Okay, if that was in the Sean Body book, I missed it. It does say in the Sean Body book that he had more experience in studios than anybody in the band. And they even intimate that he kind of like had as much experience as Tom Mallon. And so when he was in the studio with Mallon and the band during the California or United Kingdom or California sessions, apparently there was a little bit of a sense from him that like, wow, it really doesn't have to kind of be this way. It doesn't have to be this tense and difficult, But so Kaphan is kind of running the show when they're recording the initial tracks. There are two other producers credited on the album, though. There is Norman Kerner and there's Joe Ciccarelli. So Norman Kerner came in and did production on a couple of tracks at Eitzel's request. And then Joe Ciccarelli came in, listened to the tracks, and essentially remixed the album. Kaphan had mixed the entire album. I guess Eitzel wasn't happy with the mixes of many of the songs. And so Joe Ciccarelli, who is a much more kind of like well-known, kind of sort of famous guy, came in and remixed it with the exception of 2 tracks.
Well, the one thing I wanted to say about Norman Kerner, who you kind of mentioned his name, and he produced Rise.
Yep.
Correct?
Yeah.
Do you know what he went on to produce a few years later?
No, I don't.
This is Sidetracking, another album that you and I both share a love of, The Blue Moods of Spain.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, baby.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Spain, great band. One of those bands that like found their sound on album 1 and it just kind of didn't change really ever, right?
True, but that album 1 is a classic.
Oh, it's a total classic. So yeah, Norman Kerner produced Rise. He produced The Dead Part of You. And we can talk about the specific differences in the production if we can even hear any when we get into the track by track. But Eitzel, it's interesting because Eitzel definitely, was not necessarily perfectly happy with the production and the mixes. But Joe Ciccarelli, in the few comments that they got from him in the Sean Body book, mostly speaks really highly of the production that had been done prior to his involvement. He kind of makes it sound like he really, it was pretty much all there from Bruce Kaphan's work. He just tweaked it a little bit here and there. But I guess it did cause a bit of friction with Kaphan, who felt like he was doing a completely good job. I don't, without talking to these folks about exactly how this all went down, we may never really know the answer to this, but I will say that however they got to the end result, whatever the contribution of Kaphan, Kerner, and Ciccarelli and the band, Eitzel and the rest of the band, whatever those contributions were, I think the end product was, like, in my opinion, spectacular. There is just not too much on this album and the production of this album that I dislike.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think there's a weak song on the album. I mean, that's the main thing, is like the songs are all killer. There's no filler on this album. And the production, whatever the equation was that led to, but it feels all cohesive of a piece. Yes, I agree. Classic.
So I think that a few specific comments on the overall kind of sound production, like the vibe of this album that I have. So number one, I just think when you put this album on compared to any of the previous albums, but certainly California. I'm skipping over United Kingdom a little bit, but I think the most stark kind of comparison. This album is so warm. It is like it kind of washes over you in a warm way. I think it strikes me every time I listen to it. Although it's there's certainly moments of kind of sadness and sparseness. I think overall, just the warmth of this album, it lacks all of the sterility that I've kind of picked on a little bit on some of the last albums. What do you think about that, Jay William?
Yeah, I mean, I know what those critics that we were just, were ready to fight with.
Yeah.
Like, I get what they were saying. Like this album is drenched in reverb, and the pedal steel is forward, and it's on, I believe, every track, or maybe not every track, but it was a fundamental change in the sound of the band. But it's interesting because this album was clearly an attempt to elevate their commercial position.
Yeah.
But at the same time, given the overall production and just the elements at play, it's also like kind of experimental in a way, So, I mean, and that probably undermined a little bit of their commercial position, in the end. But I mean, this album is a world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's it's an album. The way I would describe it is, and I was really trying to think of like, how do I kind of describe what it is that I feel like happened with the band? That what are the elements that I would kind of put together to describe this coalescence of their sound? I think that this is an album of dynamics within the song, and there are these rising and falling just washes of sound. In a lot of ways, it's like Slow Dive or early Verb, right? It has that kind of like wash of kind of sound, and certainly the reverb is part of that. But I think for my money, that approach is really the album where they crack how to deal with Eitzel's performance style. The main instruments that you would think of or on previous AMC albums are the instruments that kind of are melody forward, tend to be more lead instruments like the pedal steel or the lead guitar. On this album, they tend to be much more orchestral, right? They take a little bit more of a backseat in terms of driving like the melody of the song. So while I agree that like the pedal steel is much more present, it isn't present in that it's doing a lot of like melody lines. There's just a lot of kind of like orchestral swells that are created by distorted guitar, by pedal steel, by really everything.
Atmosphere.
Yeah, totally atmospheric. And I think that almost serves as like when you think about like a singer and singing in front of an orchestra, sometimes those kind of emotive dynamic swells of music behind them really serve to kind of like hold up and sometimes contrast with what the individual singer is singing. I just think it's so powerful, and I think that's really what they cracked. It's an orchestral album, and it's like the band is creating a movie soundtrack behind Mark Eitzel and his acoustic guitar.
I think that's a good way to describe it, actually. Eitzel's songs that's what you're focused on, and the band is serving as like they're building the atmosphere around those songs.
Yeah. Now, I will say the only criticism I had on the production of the album, and I really was trying to be like, all right, is there anything I kind of like don't like about the production on this album that is true across all of the songs on the album? My one criticism is the drums on this album. I think the drums are just a little more boring than the rest of the album. It doesn't, the drum parts don't detract from the songs in my opinion, but there's not really anything of interest there. So that's fine. But the cymbal sound on the record, I don't like at all. This may just be because, I'm a drummer and I pay a little bit of attention to that, maybe more than other people might. But I did not like how they recorded the cymbals on this album. They're a little kind of choked out and feel tinny to me. But that's really all I kind of came up with.
I have a few notes on a couple songs where I'm like, drums sound a little like 80s-ish, like the gated, like they're like super compressed or something, like that's like making them sound a little, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure, you pick any album from 1991 and whoever produced that album would love to go back and get a second, and tweak it at this point, because there's going to be sounds that are of their era. So, hey.
Okay, so before we get into the track by track, we should probably cover the cover art. I'm just going to set the scene and then I'll let you kind of freeform about it.
Let me ask you this. Do you want to talk about the cover art of the Rise EP?
Sure, we can. I'll have to look it up.
Let me just hit it real quick.
Because the Rise EP, which came out a month or two prior to the album, I think was sort of, the first introduction to the album. And the cover art of the Rise EP is kind of cool. It's this very dimly lit, it looks like early morning, like dusk photo of what looks like San Francisco docks kind of area. And so it's got kind of a place to it or whatever, but then like you open it up and you've got this moody black and white photo of the band in what appears to be like an airplane hangar or something, but they're backlit. And so you can't see their faces.
Yeah.
There's no identifiable like person, in the band, but, the track list of this EP. So you had Rise, which was the single and track 1, and then Chanel Number 5, the studio version, which we talked about the song at length, I think, in the last episode. But I mean, this is sort of like almost like an introduction to the mood of the album as well, even though it doesn't appear on the album. Track 3, The Right Thing, which is, sort of their country western, they've been performing it live, and it sort of fits that kind of bar band kind of, feel a little bit. Now,
have you listened to these songs? Did you listen to this EP?
I did not. I didn't realize we were going to cover it in this episode. I have certainly heard this EP many times in my life, but I haven't listened to it recently. I know, as I've said before, the studio version of Chanel Number 5 is one of my favorite American music club songs. It may in fact be my favorite American music club song. But
right.
But the other ones, I don't remember The Right Thing at all, honestly.
It's an up-tempo. It's a great. I mean, this is an example of a song that I'm like, why does some Nashville starlet not come along and take this song and take it to number fucking 1? Because it's it's catchy. It's got a identifiable chorus, like. I mean, there's probably some lyrics in there that, might prevent it from becoming a Nashville Starlets thing. But,
yeah,
I mean, there's great. I mean, my main point with even covering this EP is just that it's a great EP. And it was, I'm sure for people who were hearing it prior to the album, it was like, whoa, like, it was like, I mean, it's still some of the same elements of the previous incarnation of AMC, but it just like the production and everything sounds like a notch up. You know what I mean? And Rise, I think, as an introduction to the album, like that actually probably is unprecedented in the AMC catalog, unless you go back to something like Outside This Bar. But the production of Rise is just so much bigger. It just really jumps out at you.
Yeah, so I think the only question that I'll ask you about the EP, and maybe what we should do is think about whether we want to do kind of a singles and EPs, like an ephemera episode at some point, to really dig into some of these. But the question that I have that probably sticks with me is, why would they not have included Chanel Number 5, the studio version, on the main album?
I don't know. That is a great question.
It's a really strong song.
It's really strong, and I wonder if, because the studio version is, if you want to tag AMC with the term slowcore, like, the studio version of Chanel Number 5 is probably at the extreme end, for them of the slow, somber. And maybe somebody thought like, there's already elements of that, on Everclear, and this one is too much, But I mean, it is sort of like this kind of like amazing lost song in a way.
It's just strange because, right, like, Everclear is actually a pretty short album. It's only 36 minutes and 36 seconds long, which is not a long album. Maybe they put Chanel Number 5 on, it becomes a 40-minute album. I definitely, personally, I feel like it would fit on this album perfectly. There's like, and maybe it's too somber, but I don't, it doesn't seem to me as though that's something that the band has spent a lot of time worrying about in the past.
Yeah, they haven't shied away from somber.
Yeah, so, I don't know. I mean, maybe Eitzel wasn't really happy with the studio version of it, but I have to say, I think it's just such a terrific song.
Yeah, I think it's a stunner, and The Right Thing is like almost like a 180 in terms of mood, but it's super catchy, and there's great, again on this EP, like the pedal steel, like, I mean, it just sounds really good. And then there's an acoustic version of Crabwalk, which has almost the opposite mood as the album version.
Yeah. Well, listen,
So it just goes to show that they were experimenting with things, you know.
Always experimenting, always doing alternative takes of these songs. But I wanna get on to the meat of the conversation. So
Get on to the album.
We've got to get to the album. The cover. So the cover is it's an interesting departure in the albums to date. It is a painting. The painting was done by an artist named Gene Lowe. You can find Gene Lowe on the Instagram if you've got the Instagram. It is at thegenelowe.com or .com http://. No, it is at thegenelowe at Instagram, and Lowe is spelled Lowe. Still out there making art, and if you look at the art, very interesting art. But if you look at it, you can see the similarities in the style of what she does, seems to do kind of today to what she did with this painting. Apparently, she was a friend of Jenny Gonzalez, who kind of floats around the AMC orbit for quite a while, and was given kind of carte blanche on this cover. They didn't really give her any direction at all. So
I mean, I guess she knew the title was Everclear. But,
it would have been a really good guess.
It's a really interesting. It's a really interesting image. It's a painting, but it shows what looks like a leopard. Is that leopard?
Yeah, leopard
like,
eating. It looks like it's
killing?
eating an alligator, right?
Is it eating it or is it just hugging it?
Well, I've got to imagine that it's eating it. I mean, maybe it's hugging it, but.
The alligator doesn't look dead. The alligator looks like it's smiling and it's like, okay with it.
Well, it's one of the mysteries of it. I think one of the things I like about this album cover is that the back cover and the front cover are a single piece of art. And you can see that because the art that's on the front cover is framed, right? She's painted a kind of a decorative frame into the painting itself. And that frame continues onto the back cover of the album.
Yeah, so it shows, the leopard hugging the alligator in a body of water, sunset or sunrise. It's got the nice decorative frame. It's got the colorful flowers across the top that almost look like birthday cake, like flowers. I think it's a beautiful cover. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's a really beautiful cover. They, of course, return to the painted cover later on in San Francisco. I think it is the same painter, but I am not certain. So we will discover that when we cover San Francisco. But yeah, so all right, I guess we're ready to dig in to the first song. Are you ready, Jay William? Are you ready to do this?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Let's do it. We've been dicking around. Like, come on.
Yeah, no more dicking around, guys. Side A, Why Won't You Stay? It is 2 minutes and 59 seconds. Let's go.
Is to watch you sleep, as lifeless as an angel. She was the most beautiful cloud that ever passed before the face of a girl. Seems like nothing's too good for this life. Yes, some things are too good for this world.
J. William Hall, Why Won't You Stay? Why don't we dig
Beautiful
in?
song. Beautiful opener.
Such a beautiful opener. Why don't we dig right into the lyrics, though? There's a lot that I want to talk about with the music, but let's be disciplined. Focus on the lyrics. Dig into it. So these are elegiac lyrics, right? It's an elegy, yes. I think, but for who? I may be reading far too deeply into this with far too little information, but if I weren't doing that, what would you be coming to Backtracking for? Guys, come on. I think that maybe this song is about Kathleen once again. So Kathleen died, sadly, of a drug overdose, apparently, in 1989. And so the time frame of when this song, kind of comes into circulation is more or less right. But I don't know for sure, but I will say that from, you know, when I listened to this album kind of many years ago on heavy rotation, I never really had the impression that this was an elegy, right? I always just kind of, honestly, this is a weird thing to say about a Mark Eitzel song, but I didn't pay too much attention to the lyrics. I thought this was just a beautiful romantic song. And even certain lines, like I'm checking your pulse because you're so quiet. Like I just never really felt like I should be thinking about it literally. But when I really read much more closely through the lyrics when backtracking the album, I was like, shit, I actually think he is writing much more literally here about a woman that he loves in some way being literally dead and finding the dead body. I don't know that that's literally what happened. I'm not saying that that's what happened, but that really is much more of the read I had of these lyrics than I used to have. What do you think about that, Jay William?
I guess I didn't. Well, first of all, you know, I knew that Kathleen died at some point, but I didn't know that it was as early as 1989, and that probably would have been, when he was, you know, writing this group of songs. I know he had a lot of loved ones die, you know, in that era, like his parents, and I know that there are some songs on this album that sort of speak to the AIDS epidemic and you know, friends who had AIDS at that time, or, you know, and so I couldn't really tell specifically, you know, reading through the lyrics of this song, like if this was about one specific person or if this was just a general, but, you know, it's clearly about, you know, somebody you love dying and being there, but you know, it's very sad song.
Yeah, I mean, it's much more sad on my re-listen, and I just had a tough time getting away from that. Like, if you read through these first two verses, you know, it kind of, your eyes don't catch the little thing as they narrow on your fall. So I'm literally having this impression, and again, I probably am reading too much into this given the little bit of information that I have, but I'm imagining like an overdose scenario where, you know, she's kind of nodding out, right? Your eyes don't catch the little thing as they narrow on your fall. Your eyes are closing. I'm checking your pulse because you're so quiet. I'm kissing you, but you don't feel it. And then he goes into why'd you do this to me, showing me that all I'm good for is to watch you sleep as lifeless as an angel. And then he goes into the elegy, right? She was the most beautiful cloud that ever passed before the face. Like, I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. But my read of it, you know, kind of 20 years separate from when I probably last read these lyrics, was a much more literal and frankly much darker, but equally beautiful kind of perception.
Well, and that's owing to the music, you know, like, you know, the singing, the melody, the instrumentation, the arrangement, like everything about it is just gorgeous. You know, so that combination of having these really heavy lyrics with this really gorgeous music, I mean, it's just very moving.
Very moving. So to the great segue, of course, JW, you're the king of the segue. The music. So my impression of this music, you might laugh at this, but there is a certain kind of subgenre, and I couldn't put my finger on like another clear example. But when I listen to this song, I get this sense of like a late 1950s, early 1960s high school slow dance kind of a song. Do you know what I mean?
I do, yeah. Now that you say that, I agree. This does have sort of like a middle school slow dance sort of like vibe to it, like a late 50s doo-wop.
Yeah, kind of like one of those, you know, real sad but real pretty ballads that were kind of pop, you know, frequently about like the boyfriend in a drag race dying. You know what I mean? Like those kinds of songs. I'm sure there's some name for that like little micro genre, but I don't know what it is. But I think one of the things that really that kind of provoked that for me are those arpeggios that that kind of go through the verses. But I had a question for you. Are those being played? What are those being played on? is that being played on the pedal steel, or is that being played on like a voodoo guitar? Were you able to figure it out? It really is kind of the.
It sounds like there's a guitar that's kind of doing the. I guess I could be picking out the arpeggios, but there's also like an organ that comes in, like sort of a Hammondy organ at some point.
And that Hammond is just like. I was listening to the song for like the 7th time, and I don't know if I subconsciously thought it, but I was like, God, this would be like a perfect Hammond song. And there it is. There's the Hammond, like very subtly in the background, but it's totally beautiful. Played by Bruce Kaphan. Just a perfect little instrumentation choice in this song. Okay,
so I'm reading through my notes, and I do think those arpeggios are guitars. Or is a guitar, and I thought it sounds a little bit like Every Breath You Take, where like he's picking out, the chords basically. And Every Breath You Take, of course, is like an interpolation of Stand By Me, which is exactly the sort of that doo-wop, soulful, early 60s, late 50s kind of feel. And that's sort of what they capture here, but it's definitely an AMC version of that,
Yeah, I mean, there's a cleanness to the recording of this song. There's kind of like a perfectness to the instrumentation that they've selected here, but it retains that atmospheric warmth that I think is consistent across the rest of the album. It's just a great album opener.
I agree.
I think the only to go back to Chanel number 5, I think maybe the only thing that you might say if you were deciding to leave a song off of this album like Chanel number 5 is it is a little bit too close, kind of like tonally to Why Won't You Stay?
Well, that's probably why. They had to choose one or the other, and they decided this was the better, for an album opener.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they're both beautiful songs. This is it would be a tragedy if this weren't on the album, so I don't have any criticisms there. Great song.
Indeed.
It's a 10.
Yeah.
All right. Are we ready to move on to the big hit single?
Yeah.
Okay. So Rise, second track on side A, 3 minutes and 11 seconds. Why don't we give it a listen?
The things we love don't give us too much hope. When you've lost your appetite, you're sick and tired. Maybe what you need is some food for your eyes to make them
Okay, Jay Williams.
We don't even have to give it an extra listen because that is the song chosen for the Backtracking Season 2 intro music.
That's right. When I was deciding what the intro music should be, I decided that I wanted a more upbeat American Music Club song because I feel like that's appropriate for kind of the opening of upbeat, fun to listen to podcasts like Backtracking.
Hey everybody, yeah, Backtracking, yay!
But I didn't want something that I felt like was not indicative of the AMC catalog more broadly. And I feel like of their big, upbeat songs like, Can You Help Me, for example, off of San Francisco, I feel like Rise kind of is the upbeat song that is most representative of the entirety of that catalog. Obviously a subjective choice, but that's why I picked it. Obviously I like it.
Oh, I think it's a strong choice.
So lyrically, I'm going to turn this one mostly over to you, Jay William. I do want to say, it's been well documented in interviews, in the Sean Body book, elsewhere, that this is a song that was written for an acquaintance or friend of Mark's who had AIDS and was quite ill at the time. That Mark has said in interviews, he kind of was trying to write a song to cheer up his friend who was obviously quite ill and depressed. In kind of a classically Eitzlerian way, he's self-deprecating about how successful he was in doing that, but But that's kind of the genesis of the song itself and the lyrics of the song. I had a tough time personally parsing these lyrics. However, how did it go for you, Jay William?
I definitely picked up that it was, about somebody dying. And he actually, I think in the album itself, it says the name of his friend. Somebody, because it says it was written for William Cormier. I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name, but sorry, I just
smacked everything onto the floor here.
Well, listen, when you're backtracking, sometimes you gotta take no prisoners.
You get excited. I talk with my hands a lot. So I mean, this one is a little bit more probably difficult to parse, but I definitely could tell that it was about somebody dying or trying to kind of like, make somebody feel better. But the images and the imagery in the song is a little more kind of esoteric, don't tell me how to tell the truth. You're like a store that only sells guns and knives. Tell me how to make something beautiful flash before your eyes and make them rise. Those lyrics are not apparent, when you're listening to the song.
But I do have to, although I didn't have as easy a time maybe interpreting or misinterpreting, depending on your perspective, what exactly he's kind of talking about through these lyrics. I think that "Tell Me How to Make Something Beautiful Flash Before Your Eyes" is one of the great Eitzel lyrics.
Oh yeah, great lyric.
And it just the way it sits in this song, it is such a call to arms somehow. Occasionally there are there are songs where like there's a single line that kind of appears, in a part of the song that's very, very memorable. And I think that line, the way it's sung right as you go into this very like big upbeat chorus is just awesome.
Yeah, I mean, when I first heard this song, like, because I bought the Everclear album, like I had seen in some magazine or something that American Music Club was going to release a new album. And I was like, oh, so I was vaguely aware that there was a new album coming out. And then I went to a record store and I found it and I bought the CD and I was like, oh my God. And so I hadn't heard anything. I did not hear the Rise EP. I didn't know, anything about what their new sound or producers or whatever. And, Why Won't You Stay was the first song. It was like, oh, it was this beautiful mood. And then Rise, it was like such a, just eye opener, because they had never sounded so big, and the way that the way his voice rises with the song, and the first verse, it's real kind of moody and subdued, and then they hit that pre-chorus and they go into this huge chorus. It's like, wow, like, I just think that this song was kind of unlike anything they had done before,
Yeah. It is totally unique. We talked about it in the Scripted Open. Apparently Eitzel really wanted to get a big kind of radio ready song that had a sound that could compete with the other stuff like Bon Jovi that was on the radio at this time. And I think this absolutely hits that, right? I think, you can have your own opinion on whether that's who AMC is, that's what they should be doing or anything else. But I personally think this is just kind of a perfect 1990s indie rock gem. I think a great song. There's one specific instrumentation thing I want to point out to you, Jay William. I'm certain you're going to know that what I'm talking about. I think it's Voodoo, but there are these great moments of a very distorted guitar kind of swelling. And in the chorus, there's that thing that he does where it's like, the vocals are going, anything can rise. And then you hear the guitar go, wah, 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 in the background. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Wow, 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 That might be pedal steel, actually.
Yeah, maybe it is, but I love the wah, 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 that like rising line after it's like anything can rise. And then you hear it right behind there. Wah, 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 like a literal just kind of like scalar rise there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the whole band rises at that moment.
Yeah.
That's what's so like, whoa, like when they hit it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, great little like guitar solo section in this. It really is just like an awesome song.
Yeah, definitely a big, like, sort of like aiming for pop radio kind of production, stacked vocals. The chorus repeats, like a number of times in the song. But it's also, it's still like a little bit weird and a little bit left of center, of what else was on the radio at the time. And, so obviously the song did not
become the big smash hit
Yeah.
that it was meant to be,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's no accounting for taste.
That's true.
All right. So should we move on to the next tune on this album, Miracle on 8th Street?
Yeah.
Okay, Miracle on 8th Street, track 3 on side A of Everclear. It is 4 minutes and 7 seconds. Why don't we just give it a little bit of a listen?
Come on, let's waste another 1,000 years sitting around your kitchen table. We'll turn the brandy into beer. Later they'll say, what a miracle.
Okay, there it is, Jay William. This is the first alcohol song on the album. Two tracks in it, third track, we've got an alcohol song. But my take on this kind of alcohol song is a little bit more of him pleading with some other person who's like kind of drinking a lot, in a similar way to like Gary's song, right? It seems to be more of an expression of concern by him to some other person. Now, it could be another example of these kind of like Eitzel songs that I spoke about in an earlier episode, where there are moments where Eitzel kind of sings to himself, like Johnny Mathis's feet, like he kind of like takes the role of some other person talking to him. I don't know that that's the case, but I definitely think this is more of like a little bit of an expression of concern from him towards some other person, or at least that's the way it's written.
I would agree. And I had in my notes that I thought maybe this was something about like regretful conversations with a parent who is dying. I guess especially when he gets to the like, you say I never listened to you and you're right about that. And I felt like there was like an age gap between the two characters in the song. So I didn't see it so much as like a buddy thing as more of a, but I, again, like, what the hell do I know? But, it is the first of several songs on the album that has sort of like just a little bit of religious kind of feel to it. I guess just because of the title mainly, and the whole like turning brandy into beer. Because if you read the lyrics,
that's the miracle that's referenced in the title is, later they'll say that it was a miracle turning brandy into beer.
Yeah.
But there are several songs on this album that have like a religious, Jesus' Hands, and Pillar of Salt, and there are different things that have these biblical kind of vague references to them.
That's actually interesting.
Side note.
I didn't catch that, but I love that call out. There is kind of a bit of high level biblical at least reference in here. That's a good one. Good one, Jay William. Extra points for that on the lyrics test. What are you gonna say to top that when we dig into the music on this one?
Well, again, coming off of Rise, like this is returning to the Why Won't You Stay, Chanel No. 5, like heavy vibe. You know, and it's great on the album because like the Rise ends where they hit the final thing and there's like the sort of fade out and it's sort of this like keyboardy kind of like meow, and then it just comes in with like this distant keyboard and Miracle on 8th Street starts, and I love that. It just like eases you into it, you know. It's all atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean that opening of this song, it really is all atmosphere. I think it's just a wind noise in the opening, right? It's just like a wind sound effect, and then the drums come in with that, like, you know, they're basically inside of a reverb coil.
Right.
You know, incredible reverb. I mean, there are, you know, I'm not going to quibble with those Pitchfork idiot. There is a lot of reverb on the album, but I guess that my issue is I don't find that to be a problem in and of itself. So the drums come in, and then you know, it kind of comes in gently, like you were saying, and then in the first bar of that chorus, there's some instrument kind of scaling up. Is it the pedal steel?
There's definitely a lot of pedal steel in this. Like that's what's creating a lot of the atmosphere in the song. So I'm not sure specifically which scaling up at the chorus. What do you consider to be the chorus? Because like this song is almost like it's like this floating. It's a little bit hard to tell, you know.
It's when they go into unless someone gives it to you for free. You say, I never listened to it. Oh, you're right about that. You're right about that. Like that part is the chorus in my mind.
I'm not sure. I mean, I know the pedal steel plays a huge role though, because it's creating a lot of the atmosphere and vibes behind.
I guess maybe the point here for that pedal steel question is that I am no pedal steel expert. I'm just going to say that up front.
Really?
But yeah, no, I'm not. I know people often ask me, they're like, you must be a pedal steel expert. And I say, you know what? No, I'm not. I'm just I'm a rank amateur. But I love the way that that Bruce Kaphan uses the pedal steel on this in a non-traditional way. I mean, he really does use this much more like an instrument that you would expect to hear Johnny Greenwood use in kind of latter Radiohead, or Sigur Rós uses instruments, right? In some ways, there's a lot of generation of sounds, and I think this song is a really good example of it. That's very evocative to, if you think about kind of the first, I don't know, Jay William, are you much of a Sigur Rós fan?
I've heard a few. I've heard some tunes.
Okay, you've heard some tunes. So their first album, actually, I think it's technically their second album, but the first well-known album, you know, Jonesy, who's kind of the singer-songwriter guy, you know, in those days, kind of in the 90s, their earlier albums, he played guitar a lot with a bow. It kind of like, you know, Jimmy Page, but he really did it. He kind of really just used it to generate these like swells of distortion and stuff. And it really, in some ways, there are moments on this album that the pedal steel, at least for me, it's difficult to tell if it is in fact a pedal steel, what actually the instrument is. But it gives you this, like, it gives you these beautiful kind of swells, right? These orchestral swells that I was talking about at the beginning of the episode. And I love that. I love that soundscape throughout this album.
We had talked on one of the previous episodes about how, like, in some of the earlier albums, like the cello served as the instrument that was sort of doing that kind of like padding out that background and creating a mood. And, you know, and eventually this is what they lead, you know, they get to the point where like it's pedal steel that's playing that role. And this is the album where that fully arrives.
Yeah, and I'm certain. I mean, I would guess that there are other kind of bands out there that use pedal steel in kind of, you know, more non-traditional ways. I am not familiar with any, but if it is in fact the pedal steel is being played here by Bruce Kaphan, I just think it's Really, really beautiful. I think the other thing that's interesting to kind of note about this song and the production of this song, if you listen to this, there's really the only things that are recorded in a fairly clean way, meaning like not so much reverb, not so much of a kind of a swelling sound, are in that chorus part. It's like you can hear Eitzel's acoustic guitar pretty cleanly. The vocals are quite clean, relatively speaking, and there's a shaker that's super clean. But that's it. Everything else is just kind of these beautiful soundscapes and swells in the background. I think it works really, really well for the style of songwriter that Eitzel is.
And this is the part of the Venn diagram that, the shoegazers would be like drawn to AMC. I think it's for like things like the background of this kind of song.
Yep, for sure. Okay, so are we ready to move on to Ex-Girlfriend?
Do it.
Okay, Ex-Girlfriend, song 4, track or side A, Everclear. It's 2 minutes and 49 seconds. Quick little gem. Let's listen.
Your ex-girlfriend told me you were having a bad time. Your ex-girlfriend told me you were having a bad time. Day-to-day life shouldn't be what it's all about. Day-to-day life is something we all know too much about. I guess you got no one to take care of you.
So, Jay William, I love the lyrics to this song because they're an example of, one of the songs in Eitzel's catalog where it's a really quite direct missive to a real person, or at least that's the way it sounds, right? It really there is not a lot of kind of artifice in the lyrics here. It really feels like he's expressing something very genuine, very real, kind of without any obfuscation to a person that really exists and he cares about.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody who's coming from the position of like, a couple and they broke up and you're friends with both of them. Like you like both of them equally. And so now you're kind of like stuck in the middle a little bit, and you're talking to both of them, but they're not talking to each other, and, it's a very, it paints a picture.
Yeah, there's a little bit of history around this song and a nice discussion in the Sean Body book about these lyrics. Apparently, that's really exactly the situation that happened. And after the song was written and recorded, apparently the person in question, the ex-girlfriend's ex here, the person the song is being addressed to, was somewhat irritated by the fact that this song was written about this moment in time. But I think it's such a genuine, beautiful sentiment by Eitzel. And this is really something that I think Sean Body kind of highlights in a really nice way. If you read that bridge section, which I think is the high point of the song, bad habits make our decisions for us. You should try to remember all you're holding is a handful of dust. It's not even closing time, and already the stars are falling out of the sky. You're all lit up. You got to do something. I'll help you try. I just think it's like, I think in some ways, this is like the sentiment you want to get from your friend if you're in a bad way from a bad breakup. You know what I mean? Like, gosh, it would be nice to have a friend that kind of expresses this stuff to you. Don't you think? I love that about this song.
Oh yeah. I mean, the sentiment is definitely loving and caring.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's
which is rare, a rare thing in music these days.
Yeah, it really is, and I mean, it's just so it's like really, it's like pretty raw. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just I think it's a really, really sweet sentiment. I love that about this song. I don't know that this is true. Obviously, it could be written about a woman as well, but because I'm a a horrible person, I guess. I assume it's written to a guy, but I like the expression. I don't know. I just kind of like the idea of a guy expressing this to some other guy. You know what I mean? I think it's
two buddies talking about a breakup.
Yeah. It's very nice.
I love the, you talked about the bridge where like things kind of swell, like that's kind of the climactic part of the song. And the big line at the beginning of that, bad habits make our decisions for us, is such a great line. It applies so broadly, to so many different things, but it really stands out in the song, like I think, the production, like this is one where I could see a case for like, if you were going to remix that, you might want to like pull some of the reverb back a little bit, because the production is more of kind of a stew in this one, and so I feel like some of the lyrics get lost a little bit,
Yeah. I think that's probably fair. But so musically, I think that this song is kind of a rocker, actually, right? The bass, for the first time on the album, the bass is really present and kind of is the driving force in the song.
Yeah, there's some definite big like rock bass parts on this song,
Yeah, but the wash in the background, again, it's there. I'm assuming Voodie and Kaphan. But I think the thing that really strikes me as you kind of go through the album chronologically is this is really the first time where you kind of hear that kind of like driving eighth notes on the bass, and the bass is much less, kind of boomy in the background and much more rhythmic and higher in the mix.
Much more assertive, and the drums on this song have more of the kind of like the big 80s production smack, kind of sound to them. They're a little glossy. I think like this song feels like it was primed to be a potential single, but the thing that I love about the beginning of it is that like everything about the song feels like it's kind of like, going for like big rock radio kind of thing. But then Voodie comes in with this like super angular, odd, like entry into the song. Like it opens with him doing this kind of like angular off-kilter solo just very briefly, and then it gets into the song, but I love that, like, at the same time that they were reaching for the brass ring, they were also like shooting themselves in the foot a little bit, like just doing like odd kind of like little production touches, because that's who they are. But that's, probably some of the reason why, like, like there was something about them that was a little too strange for mainstream radio,
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I definitely get that, but, we can quibble about that more maybe in the next episode, but, yeah, I listen to this now and I still kind of feel like not every song, and I actually think, I'm not sure that I would buy this one as a single, but, Rise, I think I still don't quite understand what the problem would be with that being a big, radio hit. But anyway, here we are many, 30 years later or something. And if it hasn't been figured out.
We're Monday morning quarterbacking it, right?
That's totally right. So is it time to, one last thing I wanted to mention about this. You had talked about the drums, the kind of big drums at the end of this song. The end of this song is really the first place that I noticed that I don't love the drumming on this album. I think when it goes big at the end of the album, you hear that it's a weaker, I think it's a weaker drummer actually than Sluggo, than Tom Mallon, I think, in my opinion. I think it has a tougher time working through the end of this song. And I also think it's where you hear that real kind of rough cymbal sound on the album. So if there are drummers out there and want to play along with me, and go check that out and see what you think. All right, but we're going to go on to Crabwalk. It is one of the more controversial songs on the album, potentially. We will see when we backtrack it, but it is 3 minutes and 33 seconds. Let's Whoa.
Reels around the nightclub like the hubcaps off of a car that just crashed into a sign that said, "This way to the nightclub." It says you ain't worth a dime to his life support systems, but they still keep him talking on the chance that he'll say something. Whoa. But don't you feel the decks rolling? Hey, I think we're on stormy sea. I'm having trouble keeping down the life that I've stolen. He said, "Come on and do the crab walk with me."
Jay Williams, talk to me about the lyrics of this song.
So Crabwalk, I think, checks the box that they have, kind of had on all of their albums up to this point, where they do have one song that has more of the overt country kind of, what did I call it? Cornpone kind of, style, where it's like the country bar band thing. And this is the song on this album. The difference is the production of this is cohesive with the rest of the album, and the song is fun. I mean, it's a song, clearly it's another, it's a song about a drunk in a bar who is stumbling here and there because, they're drunk. And so that's my interpretation. So they're doing the crab walk, which I assume is like this sort of sideways stumble
Yeah.
kind of thing,
Yeah. All right. So lyrically, I think that it is fun, goofy, funny, heavily imagistic. I think that this is an example of a song where the lyrics and the music, like the actual kind of like execution of the music, fit so perfectly well. It really feels like the band and the instruments and what the band is doing feels like they're drunkenly crab walking around the bar floor, right?
Yes. Music matches the lyrics, yes.
I don't really have too much to say about there are some great lines obviously in these lyrics. I think some really well-known lines. Wheels around the nightclub like a hubcap. That is a line that I think the symmetry in that line, where it like starts with the nightclub and ends with the nightclub, but like the way you kind of get from the first word to the last word in that line is like really fun and kind of funny. It's just like
it feels like you're stumbling drunk as you're going through the song.
Yeah. It's just it's just really fun, good lyrics. But musically, I think there's a decent amount to talk about. This is definitely, as you were saying, this is definitely kind of the goofy song on the album. Similar to some of the other songs that they have these pressure release songs on most of the other albums that we've talked about so far. But in some way, it, for me, fits aesthetically much better than any of the other pressure release songs have. It really feels to me like it belongs on an album that includes Dead Part of You, Royal Cafe, and Rise. You know what I mean? It doesn't stick out like a sore thumb like some of those other songs do, at least in my opinion. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would agree, because on some of the earlier albums, those have been the songs that I've felt the least enamored with or whatever. Like I felt like they broke the mood in a way that kind of bothered me, and on this album it does feel necessary. It's sort of the counterbalance to the heaviness of some of the other songs. And I think because, the title of the album is Everclear, and there are numerous songs on the album that are talking about alcohol or whatever, like this one kind of fits right in, and I think as the closing track of side one, it's a great closer. Like there's been a lot of heaviness, on the first side, but, I think this one kind of ends on a lighter note and then, kind of gets you ready for side two. It feels more in control in a way. Like, even though I don't know. There's something about it that doesn't feel as random.
Yeah, I just feel like it doesn't feel like this is a different band. I've kind of said that a bunch of times, and I don't mean to say that I feel like AMC on those other, when I say, oh, this sounds like a different band. I really articulated it poorly, but I really did mean it. It feels like there were kind of multiple potential directions for AMC to take as a band. And on many of the earlier albums, they took all of them. Like one song took one direction, a different song took another. And that's fine, right? It's eclectic, and there's nothing wrong with having kind of a broad set of inspirations and wanting to go in diverse directions creatively. But for me as a listener, I like an album as kind of as a cohesive single kind of piece of work. And I do tend to like bands that over time kind of grow into a unique and somewhat consistent sound. And that really hasn't been AMC so much in the previous albums. And I think it definitely is something that's achieved on this album. And I think this song is a good example of how you can kind of have diverse types of songs and different diverse approaches to songs, but still somehow execute them in a unique way as a band, a unique and consistent way or coherent way, I guess.
It might just be a product of they're 5 albums in at this point, and so. They have a better sense of making it all sound of a piece, rather than just oh, let's do this, different kind of style on this song and different style on this song or whatever. And, but I do think that the diversity in their sound is probably worked against them as well commercially, because they did have such a range, they couldn't be easily typecast or pigeonholed into whatever genre or subgenre you wanted to put them in. We've labored over what do we call them in the intro to Backtracking, and what did we wind up with?
Pioneering indie
indie rockers or something. I don't know.
It doesn't exactly work, and it's but that's the beauty of AMC.
Yeah, it's true. The last thing I want to say about this one, I just want to throw it out there because I love that they kept it in. The whoops in the chorus. Somebody in the band yelling out, whoops.
Yeah, they do it twice.
Yeah.
I noted that as well. It's during the pre-chorus, and there's this dobro guitar that's kind of doing its thing, and then somebody goes whoops, and then they do it a second time in the same spot, and so I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, really nice touch. So, Jay William, believe it or not, we're at the end of side A of Everclear. Yeah.
Already?
I know. I feel like it's only been close to 2 hours. But here we are. So it is time for us to say goodbye for the week. Next week, we're going to be back with side B of Everclear, a terrific backside of an album. This album's got a terrific, terrific backside, Jay William. Hello?
Check out the backside on that album.
All right. So why don't you tell them all of the different ways they can get in touch?
Well, what you do is you go onto the YouTube and you look for the subscribe button and just punch the screen as hard as you can.
Wait, on the YouTube? Because we're not on YouTube.
Oh, we're not? No. Or what is it? Backtracking Rocks, ROX.
At Backtrack. All right, listen, you're shit in the bed on this. I don't want to confuse the people. I'm taking the mic away. Guys, I know you want to get in touch. Don't go to YouTube. We're not on YouTube. We don't have cameras on. We don't have any visuals we can put on the podcast. This is an old school radio style podcast. We're not a bunch of talking heads in Zoom that you just pretend that you're looking at while you're actually just listening and probably
this isn't AI. You might be fooled. You might think this sounds so intelligent that it's got to be artificial intelligence. It's not. It's two live human beings rambling on and on about American Music Club.
That's right. There is no way you could capture this in an AI. Not even the powerful Chinese Communist Party could take their thinking machines and apply them to what it is that we're putting in. It's too high level. It's too complicated.
I do guarantee you this, though, that if you go to the Chinese, what is it, Deep Seek, and you say, tell me all about American Music Club, you're going on a list, buddy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I don't know what list that is, but you are going on a list. They've got lists. They got all kinds of lists. So, but listen, get in touch with us. It's Instagram at Backtracking Rocks RX. It's Twitter at Backtracking Rocks RX. It's Reddit. Our username is Backtracking Rocks RX. Guess where else we are, everyone? We are on Facebook. How are we on Facebook, you ask? This is a new thing. It was suggested to us we make a Facebook. I do not have a Facebook account, so I made a Facebook account that the first name is Rocks, R-O-X. The last name is Backtracking. Why did I do it that way? Because when I put in Backtracking as the first name, it detected that that was not a real first name, and it said you can only have an account if you're a real person. I don't know how they did that.
It must have been using that. It must have been using the Chinese AI.
Probably. I mean, who knows?
But Facebook was using the DeepSeek.
They could have been. They could have been. They're all in cahoots. So friend us on Facebook. Rocks Backtracking is the name. Making podcasts is our game. So just get in touch with us or just do an email. For God's sake, please do an email. That's actually what we want.
Hey, we're Gen X, baby. We do emails.
It is backtrackingrocksrox@gmail.com. We will be back after you've hit this. You've slapped the hit. You've subscribed the like. You've shared the share. You've reviewed the 5-star. You've done all those things. We'll be back next week. We're going to cover the backside of this album, and then we'll be done with it. So please tune in then. Bye-bye.
Bye.